Adoption is the strongest child welfare intervention a state can make. Terminating parental rights and deciding on an adoption has far-reaching implications and is by many considered controversial. All European countries have legal mechanisms that allow for adoption without parental consent. But the European Court of Human Rights has stated that adoptions can only be consented to in exceptional circumstances. Yet we know very little about the actual decisions and of what is considered exceptional. The question is then, how do decision makers exercise discretion in decisions on adoption from care? In my research, I have studied adoption from care in Norway. The legal base for adoptions from care in Norway is the Child Welfare Act of 1992. The Act provides the Norwegian state with an opportunity to carry out adoption from care without parental consent if the placement in care is expected to be permanent, if adoption is in the child's best interest, and if the adoption applicants are the child's foster parents and are proven to care for the child. However, adoption is rarely used in Norway, with less than 1% of the children in foster care being adopted in 2018. The political guidance on adoption is limited, and the legal criteria are ambiguous. This means that the child welfare workers in the first line, and experts on children and judges in the court-like decision-making body, the County Social Welfare Board, are delegated with a wide discretionary space to make decisions on adoption. This exercise of discretionary reasoning is crucial to examine. While discretion is both necessary and inevitable, professionals' exercise of discretion threatens the rule of law and its principles of predictability, legality, and equal treatment. A wide discretionary scope leaves room for emotions, assumptions, and presumptions to guide decisions on the best interest of the child. In order to study how decision makers justify their recommendations for action, I presented child welfare workers in the first line and members of the County Social Welfare Board with an identical case scenario. This is a short version of that case. David is a 4-year-old boy who has been in the same foster home since he was a baby. David has the needs of any other child, but is considered vulnerable. His parents struggle with mental illness and substance abuse, and have not been able to demonstrate change. David has met his parents through visitation, which have worked out okay in the past, and he knows who they are. But his parents have neglected to show up several times, and he has started to react negatively to these meetings. David's placement is considered permanent, and his foster parents now want to adopt him. After reading the case description, the respondents were asked to consider the following question. Would you suggest adoption or continued foster care for David? The results are interesting. Adoption is clearly the preferred alternative for David, both in the first line and in the County Social Welfare Board. But why did they choose adoption? What was it in this case that made them make this decision? 5 main factors are the most evident in the answers. The child's attachment to his foster parents, the parents' inability to change and provide adequate care, time, length of the placement and age of the child, poor quality of contact and the child's negative reactions to contact, and last, the needs of the child and that adoption provides permanence and has positive effects. As we can see, a number of best interest elements emerged as reasons for choosing adoption. What would have changed the decision? To find out what really matters for decision makers, we asked them what should have been different in the case for them to change their decision. One factor clearly stood out: parental behavior. If parents show positive change, and if the quality of contact is considered adequate or good, the respondents would consider changing their decision from adoption to continued foster care. This was mentioned by 86% of the respondents. In contrast to the reasons for choosing adoption, the main factor here is parent-oriented. So, To go back to the main question, how do decision makers exercise discretion in decisions on adoption from care? The formal structures, such as legislation and policy, clearly guide the best interest justifications. In addition, the child welfare context and the wider societal norms contribute to shape the exercise of discretion. A number of best interest elements emerged as reasons for choosing adoption, but the decisive factor that would tip the scale are parental capabilities and the quality of contact between the child and his parents. In other words, parent-oriented considerations are decisive for the child's best interest assessments. How are the different considerations balanced against each other? The results reflect a decision-making practice where the support for adoption is ultimately dependent on the weighing of two decisive norms: the right to biological family life and the right to a de facto family life. In this, there are signs of a tension between children's rights and family preservation, which are often seen in modern child welfare. The consistency in how these elements are emphasized indicate that there is a hierarchy of norms guiding the discretionary application of the law in cases on adoption. The decision-makers' responses suggest that adoption is understood as the appropriate choice for a child whose attachment is to his or her foster parents. This tips the scale towards adoption and de facto family life. It is nonetheless clear that the legal bonds between the child and parents and the value of parent-child contact tips the scale towards biological family life if parents are able to reform and commit to change. The findings indicate that decision-makers construct informal standards to cope with contradicting demands. The uniformity in attitudes do create some form of predictability. However, what appear as a standardized judgment may indicate that ideology is a force that governs discretion. The legitimacy of the reasoning can therefore be questioned, and there is need for measures of accountability to guide and improve decision-making. Most legislations in Western societies include the possibility for the state to terminate parental responsibility and to carry out an adoption without parental consent. It is therefore reason to believe that the findings from the present study could be relevant for understanding practice in other child welfare systems as well.